All right, so in about 1 second, you guys should be able to see my screen. And we'll start talking about the college supplemental process. So just to review a little bit, the first week that we were together, we started talking about what the Common Application actually looks like, what it entails. And just as a quick review, the Common App is what most schools, most universities use for college applications. That's the way that the application is actually built, and that's the application that we sent out. Throughout that Common App application, there's something called a Common App essay. That was the subject of our second webinar, where we reviewed the different essay prompts. In general, it's a personal statement, so you guys can go back to those notes and those webinars to kind of catch up on those topics or rewatch them closer to when it is relevant for you and your child as you navigate this process. And that brings me to the topic from this week. So this week is all about supplemental essays. So what are supplemental essays? So you guys should all be able to see my screen now. Let me know if that's not the case. But a supplemental essay, usually almost every single school asks it. It's uncommon for a school not to ask a supplemental essay. But there are some schools that don't, but most of them require a supplemental essay. And a supplemental essay is basically a much shorter essay than the Common App. So the Common App is 650 words. Usually the supplements are anywhere between like 100 to 500 words. And these are just for the colleges to get to know you a little bit better. It's a more personalized touch. So there's different kind of themes to these supplemental essays. So the goal of them is for colleges to get to know you better. They're much shorter than a personal essay, so they offer you the opportunity to tell stories about yourself, to show off your personality, and kind of expand on the rest of the items in your application. So in general, they can almost ask you any question as a supplement. Today, I want to focus on the big thematics, or what I call essay archetypes. So there's a few that I definitely want to cover today, and then there's some that are extra that we can talk about in kind of less detail. So let's call this essay archetypes. And the first one I want to talk about is the why us question. So almost every single school that you guys or your kids will apply to will ask you why us. So for example, what do you value most about Columbia and why? Please let the admissions committee know what draws you to Brown University. So in general, they all word it a little bit different, but what they're really trying to say is why our school. So I'm gonna just label this essay archetypes. And again, the first one that I want to talk to is the why us essay. And this one's really, really important. And you have to be really, really careful here because in a lot of the supplements, you can kind of like write one main supplement and then kind of recycle them more or less. Like if they ask you about what's your favorite extracurricular, or tell us about a service commitment that you do, all of those are more or less recyclable. You can alter them a little bit depending on the school and depending on the word count. But the why us essay is extremely personalized to each school. So what you definitely should not do is use phrases that could be attributed to any institution. So you definitely should not just have one why us prompt that you just copy and paste and change the school's name. That's a big, big, big no-no. What you do have to do is you have to find a personal connection of why you want to go to that school. So usually this prompt requires a little bit of research. So you have to go on the website, you have to do your research. If it's really your top institution, I would recommend talking to students that actually go there, because that kind of gives you insider knowledge that something like the website won't give you alone. Or perhaps going there on a college visit and asking them very specific questions, and we can think about or reflect together on what those mean. How do you actually get to know an institution? Like, why do you really want to go there? And the more authentic you are in these prompts, and the more the admissions committee believes and values that you've really researched their institution beyond, like the simple Google search, the more they'll believe that you really want to go there. And you showing commitment of really wanting to go there is an important part of actually getting in, because they want to admit students that will eventually, say yes to them also. So I'm going to write some of these big ideas that I talked about down. If anybody has any questions thus far, the chat box is always open for you guys to ask. So again, the why us question, it is asking, why do you want to go to this school? That's basically what it's emphasizing. And again, to answer it effectively, you'll need to do significant research. This is the one that really requires significant research, especially for your top institutions. I can't emphasize that enough. And again, what do I mean by research? I mean, look on their website. That's going to be your step one. And think about what kind of draws you to, like, search their website, look through their courses. Most of the colleges have all their courses on their website. Look towards the kinds of things they emphasize. Are they emphasizing service? Are they emphasizing climate? Some institutions have very famous climate programs. Are they emphasizing academics? Are they, do they have a very well-known specific math program or art program or music program that speaks to you? Why specifically that school? Do you know somebody that went there that had a very specific experience that changed their life? Is it the city that the school is in? Be authentic to yourself and really ask yourself, what's like attracts me to the school? And a lot of times students have an initial attraction to the school, and once they start doing their research, they realize it might not actually be the best fit. So part of this process is, of course, answering the prompt effectively, but you're also doing your own research about what are the different things that are important to me in the school that I go to? What do I want to study? What kind of curriculum do I want? Do you want the curriculum to be open and flexible, or are you the kind of person that needs something more rigid? Do you know what you want to study versus you don't know what you want to study? Do you want a strong science program? It just depends. It's very personalized, so it's hard for me to speak on it, but I do want to emphasize that it requires significant research. So schools can really see through if you apply to like Harvard, Columbia, Cornell, every single one of those, because it's an Ivy League, and you use very broad statements such as great professors, amazing academics. You can apply that to all those schools, and then you just change your names. So admissions committees get very good at seeing through that kind of stuff. So you have to not fall into the trap of doing that. So on their website, you talk to alum. Ideally, you visit. And ideally, all of this is a process that takes a while, like a few days. I don't expect you guys to, on one day, look on the website and learn all these things. Every time that you visit the website, you will learn something new about the school. And once you start looking at multiple websites, you can also start comparing, like, what do the different schools emphasize? And specifically under website, I'm also going to include classes. That can be really helpful to see the kind of courses that they actually offer. So again, an example prompt, I'm not going to list a bunch of them. I'll just list one, but they're pretty self-explanatory. And in general words, they're asking, why do you want to go to our school? So for example, I have the one pulled up from Columbia here. Please tell us what you most value about Columbia and why. So you can see they didn't directly ask why us, but essentially that's what they're asking. And I do also want to emphasize that for all of the supplemental essays, oops, I think my screen disappeared. Let me just bring it back. But I do want to emphasize that for all of the supplemental essays, most of them are not meant to be another personal statement, right? They're not meant to be 650 words or a whole page. So they're meant to be kind of short, sweet. They're meant to answer the question that's being posed to you. So you have to really use your real estate appropriately. You have 300 words. So it seems like a lot, but it's really not. And when you start writing and you have a lot of filler and you start saying, the thing that I most value about Columbia is blah, 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 that's a waste of words. So it's kind of an artistry. As for the Common App, I would recommend that first you just word vomit, right? You think about all the themes that are attracting you to Columbia's website, to Columbia's school, you speak to some alumni, and once you have your themes, you just spit it all out into the page. And then the next day or in a few hours, you start molding it more into like a more concrete response. But you'll see that your style of writing becomes much more concrete and to the point because it's pretty hard to get all your ideas into that 300 words. So let's talk about some do's and don'ts for these essays. So I'll put the don'ts in red. And then we can have a section for the do's in green. All right, so I'm gonna go with the don'ts first, just to kind of get all the negatives out of the way, and then we can do the do's. So do not be general. So you really want to be specific to the institution. So don't say things like, I love New York City and that's why Columbia, because in New York City, there's a bunch of other schools that's not specific to Columbia. So for example, avoid city, avoid things like weather. I've seen people say that before, like a Florida school because it's always sunny. Avoid reputation, right? Like don't say I want to go to your school because you have a great reputation. A lot of schools are very well known for academia. Don't use phrases that could be attributed to every institution. So I mentioned this before verbally, but I'll put it into our notes. Something like great professors, right? You could say that about a million schools. That doesn't, oops, that doesn't mean anything specific. Sorry, guys. On the other hand, be specific, right? The opposite of be general, which is a don't, you do want to be specific. So what that means is mention specific professors, mention student traditions or landmarks on campus. Mention organizations that you want to join, clubs that are sort of speaking to you, classes that you want to take. So again, the name of the game is showing that you've done your research. Like you really know about the school. It's not just the name of the school. You really know about the courses they offer, the vibe of the school, the qualities that are important to them, and you are a good fit for the school because you've done your research and you see yourself fitting into these organizations and these courses and these traditions. Professors that you're whose research you're interested in. I'm running out of space, but I'll squeeze it in here. Traditions and landmarks on campus. I'm going to run to the next page to continue our list. Okay, so don't, I already said this, use the same essay for every school you're applying to. So like I said, they can really, really see through that. They really can. These admissions committees people, they have been working on admissions committees for many, many years. Most of them have served at more than one school. They can really, really, really see through it. So make sure that you're being personalized. Even in the templates that you use, a lot of students say, I really like the school because I want to do research with blah, 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 and they just switch the name. And I also really like the school because I like that these classes are interesting to me, and they just copy paste classes. So try to not make it look like a template. It's okay that some of the things, depending on the amount of schools you apply to, it's sometimes not, possible to write brand new complete essays. But in general, you do want to be specific enough and not templated. You want to think about sort of what themes match you and match the school, right? In general, you can have like 5 to 6 themes that are important to yourself, but only 1 to 2 of them will apply to each school. So those are the themes that you kind of want to play around with for each school. And that brings me to my last don't, where you don't just want to use a template or use a list. So do not sound like a robot. This is general essay ideas. You don't want to list every single thing the school has to offer because that just seems inauthentic. You can't possibly love every single thing in the school. You want to really highlight 2 to 3 details that you want to focus on and that are important to you. And then some more do's. You want to be personal, right? Be personal and be authentic. What does that mean? Tell them something about yourself. Tell an anecdote that connects you to the school or the campus in some way. So again, this might not be applicable to everybody, but a good idea, a good angle that I thought of, usually when I help students write essays, I really spend some time getting to know them and thinking about what's important to them. So this past application cycle, I was helping a student kind of brainstorm for his essays, and his interest was studying mathematics, specifically environmental mathematics, like applying mathematics and statistics to solving the climate change problem. And he was also really big on like native lands and on respecting our environment and environmentalism and sustainability, those kind of themes. And we wrote an essay together for Why Columbia. And in Columbia, they have a huge institute for climate change and it's relatively new. So that was a very good angle to connect something that he's truly passionate about and something that he wants to study with this massive climate institute that the school has to offer with so many resources that he could then be connected to. And it doesn't apply to every single school, right? Like not every single school has this kind of massive climate initiative, but Columbia happened to have that. And that also showed that he was a good fit for that school. So you want to think about this why us essay as a relationship between you and the school, right? There's give and take. What can you do for the school? What can you offer? Like, how do your interests and goals align with them? And what can the school do for you? So that's really what this essay kind of is. And then the last do that I want to add into our notes is consider the school's values. And how can you kind of figure that out? So again, the website is a good plus. You can read about the honor code, the motto, the philosophy. A lot of people or a lot of schools on their websites will have a statement. Who do they quote on their statement? Like, who are their role models? Who are some famous people that have graduated that school and are important to what that school stands for? And why does that resonate with you? So those are the kinds of ideas that you guys should really think of. So just to summarize with some tips, I would say think about this prompt as a relationship with the school. So again, what can you do for the school and what can the school do for you? Some general tips. In the intro, I would start thinking about what first interested you about the school. Then in the body, you expand on these things, but you start weaving in your own experiences. So for example, um, consider what you have done to demonstrate your instance in the institution. So if you're looking forward to experiencing the school's science laboratory, chemistry laboratory, talk about the impressive things that you've already researched, as well as the things that you would then like to contribute or like to keep doing, right? So what you can do for the school, show that you're impressive, and then how the school can help you, show that the school has a resource that will take your talent, take your interest, and allow it to grow. That's kind of the idea. And then finally, in the conclusion, you want to emphasize again that you're enthusiastic and you want to connect to something personal. And that's what I was mentioning before in the do section, where you can say that you're excited to engage in an annual scavenger hunt or bike race or whatever other rite of passage that you've researched that's specific to the school. All right, so we really covered the big first prompt. Again, this one requires a lot of research. So look up the college you're applying to, look up the specific school that you're applying to, look up the themes. What does that place emphasize? Is it a very traditional school? Does it more emphasize like independent learning, personal learning, something like Brown has an extremely open curriculum. That's what they're known for. Interdisciplinary learning? Does it emphasize community and giving back to your community? Does it emphasize leadership? Is it all about academics? What are some campus landmarks? What traditions are associated with the different landmarks on campus? Is there any interesting or quirky fact about the school, a fun fact that you learned when you were touring it? Are there any specific opportunities the school offers, like institutes or special centers that they partner with? Extracurriculars, clubs, organizations, alumni, and why do they inspire you? So all of those are, beginning points. Once you do all your research, one of those will probably spark a personal connection and in for you to then be able to develop this essay with these tips and do's and don'ts, okay? So this is the most common prompt, so that's why I wanted to cover it first. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, great. So in that case, we'll keep running along to the second prompt that I want to talk about. So the second one is instead of why that school, it's why a certain area of interest or why the major that you picked. So we can call this why major essay. So in this essay, they ask students why they're applying for a particular major, particular department, why they're interested in a particular field of study. Um, so let's think about how to approach that one. So again, let's begin with just some example prompts so you guys see the kinds of questions that they may ask. So an example is, please explain why you wish to study in the academic areas you selected at Rice University. So this is pretty standard. You'll see that when you fill out the Common App, they require you to answer this question of academic interest, and then usually they ask you this as a supplement. So this one is like pretty standard. You can change Rice University with any other school, and then it's appropriate for you to answer that. For another example is Brown. Again, like I said, Brown University, if anybody's interested, is very known for their open curriculum. So they ask you specifically about that. So their why major essay looks like this. They say Brown's open curriculum allows students to explore broadly while also diving deeply into their academic pursuits. And then they say, tell us about an academic interest that excites you and how you might use the open curriculum to pursue it. Okay, so as you can see, some of them are more specific where they force you to pick specific academic areas and then explain why you selected them. And some of them are a little bit more open to interpretation. So you can define academic interest as anything, right? Versus in the first prompt, the academic areas are more defined, something like mathematics or sustainability or biology. Versus in the second one, your academic interest can really be anything, right? They leave it open to your interpretation. So those are example prompts. I do also want to mention that sometimes they merge the two that we've talked about. So they merge the why us and what are your interests. So I know NYU is known for doing that. So they say, we would like to know about your interest in NYU. We are particularly interested in what motivated you to apply, and more specifically, why you have applied or expressed interest in a particular area of study. So as you can see, they're basically asking you why us, and why do you want to study whatever you want to study at our university. So sometimes they fuse the two. So for those types of essays, you will fuse both pieces of advice that I'm giving you. The other sort of thing to think about is, again, word limit here. So this first prompt was asking for 150 words. The second prompt was 250 words. Again, it really depends on the school, but 150 words is very short and condensed. So you really have to get used to getting the most real estate out of your words. Every word has to count and communicate something that you want the school to know. Very little filler, right? More substance in these types of prompts. So the why us essay is similar to the why major essay. Ideally, you want to write about how you first became interested in this specific field of study. So for example, if it's engineering, how do you know that you want to be an engineer, right? At 18, what fascinates you about engineering? If it's psychology, why do you want to do psychology? If it's English, what do words mean to you? And then you want to discuss activities that you've done that are related to the major. So how do you know that you want to do them? Show them that you actually know what engineering is, right? You did a summer program where you were an engineer, or you shadowed in the hospital and that's how you know that you want to be pre-med, whatever it is. And then you always weave into why that major at their school specifically, right? So maybe it's because they have a top tier engineering program, or maybe it's because you research their professors and classes and research projects, and that specifically aligns with your interest. Or maybe it's about a music program that they have, whatever it is that aligns with the major that you want to study. So our tips here are going to be write about how you first became interested in that field of study. And this is always like a good hook. A lot of people have, very great stories about how their initial interest was when they were a little kid and how that changed over time and shaped. Or sometimes it's just one specific experience that you had in high school. Sometimes it's a role model, whatever it is, be authentic and true to yourself. Then you discuss activities that are related to that area of study. Then connect that to what you hope to get from their program. So this is again when that tiny bit of research kind of comes in. So you want to mention certain professors, courses, research projects. And as always, whenever you are kind of preparing to apply for a school, you want to look at all the different supplemental essays that they're asking you. So you don't kind of say the same thing, like, so you don't already answer this question in the why them question, why us, and then you're like, oh wait, I have nothing to write for the why major. So I always recommend that you kind of make a big Google Doc for yourself, make a table, and write out each school, when their deadline is, what specific program you're applying to, and what their supplemental essays are, so that you can really brainstorm broadly and then kind of get more narrow into each school as you go on. So again, some questions that you can research that will help with this. What major or majors are you applying for, right? A lot of students are undecided. Sometimes it's okay to put undecided, but sometimes they really want you to pick an area of interest, even if you're not 100% decided. try to find at least 2 professors within the department whose work you admire. What courses do they teach? What is their field of research? Look up their publications. What kinds of things are they working on actively? And are they active, right? Because it's not enough to just look up a random name and name drop a professor's name in your essay. You want to make sure that they are still actively contributing to that institution. Sometimes the websites aren't updated. So you really want to show them that you did your research, you look them up, and just 6 months ago, they published something new. They're actively working with students. What are some courses that you are looking forward to taking? Specifically, look at the courses that are unique and upper level, right? Because almost every school will offer basic intro to biology, chemistry, calculus. Try to look for their kind of upper level courses that you will take once you're really high up in that major, not the introductory courses that almost everybody participates in. And then not just courses, are there any student organizations connected to that major? So if you want to study engineering or robotics, is there a student club that, participates in engineering competitions or robotics competitions or just does robotics for fun? What are some long-term career goals that are supported by this major? So be specific, but also broad at the same time. How will an education in the specific field of study that you're pursuing, in the specific school that you're interested in, affect positive change in your community? So again, they are looking for leaders. So anything that you can show that you are kind of thinking big will only be a positive in any supplemental essay. Okay. Any questions on this why major prompt? All right, so then we can move on to, I think, one more. This is another really big one that a lot of schools ask. So I'm happy that we have the time to cover it. This is something that I can call the community essay. Okay, so the community essay asks students, what can you contribute to our school's community? That's one way. Another idea is they can ask students to write about a way in which they've contributed to their community already. And alternatively, they can ask students to describe a community that they come from or that they call home. So there's really 3 ways this can go. So number 1, they can ask, what can you contribute to our school's community? Basically, what do you have to offer is what they're asking you. So again, I can lean on Brown again for an example. They say at Brown, you will learn as much from your peers outside the classroom as in academic spaces. How will you contribute to the Brown community? So you answered the why them question, and now they're asking you, well, why should we pick you, right? What can you do for us? Before it was kind of like, what are we doing for you? And now, what can you do for us? So again, answering this question requires you to know something about the school to understand how you contribute, how do you fit in, is basically what they're asking in that prompt. Another way the community essay can go is they can ask students to write about a way in which they've contributed to their own community. So we can lean on Columbia for this example. So their prompt states, Columbia students take an active role in improving their community. Share one contribution that you have made to your family, school, friend group, or other community that surrounds you. So I also want to highlight that just from reading the prompt, you also gain a little bit of an understanding of what that institution cares about, right? So if they're telling you that their students, take an active role in giving back to their community, they're telling you like, these are the kids we pick. We pick kids that give back to their community. So show me one way that you've done that, right? So you already know that that's a value that's important to them, giving back to the community, your role in the community. So you really want to reflect and think of one specific time. Also notice they ask you to talk about one time. You only have 200 words. So you don't want to mention like one sentence on a million things that you've done. You really want to search and think of one thing that's really meaningful to you and shows how you make a difference to your own community and shows by example the kinds of differences that you can then make to their community. And then alternatively, the last thing is they just basically ask you about your own community, the community you belong for. This is basically a diversity question. So for this one, a good example is Michigan's prompt from last year. They specifically tell you everyone belongs to many different communities or groups. Choose one community that you belong to and describe that community and your place within it. And they list what a community means. And here's their list, defined by shared geography, religion, ethnicity, income, cuisine. So they give you a lot of kind of themes that you can think about. Interest, race, ideology, or intellectual heritage. And then they say, choose one of the communities you belong and describe. And this one is 300 words. So as you can see, they're all a little bit different, but what they're focusing on is community, right? Either their intellectual community at their school, your own community that you're part of. It's also important to, Start thinking about all of this kind of at the same time, but separately, because a lot of students write about their identity in their Common App essay already, and then it becomes a little bit hard to answer this because you've already shared a big piece of your identity. So you do want to kind of read everything at the same time and start like splitting up ideas for your application so you're not extremely repetitive. Although it's good to harp on the same big themes, I wouldn't recommend writing about the same exact thing for each prompt and your Common App because it just becomes repetitive, and you want every opportunity, Common App, Supplement, resume, everything for the school to get to know you better. So my tips for this is to think about community, right? Colleges are community. They're looking for people that are going to be involved. So you want to show how you will be a good community member in their community. And to show that, you want to prove to them that you've already been a good community member. So the big thing that I would say, the big thing you want to emphasize in any sort of community prompt is leadership. So I'll put that in, stars, and I'll write it here in the middle. And on the next page, we can think about the actual, like how to actually go about writing this. But the big thing here is leadership. Colleges or communities, they want leaders for their community, right? They're shopping for leaders. They don't just want to admit anybody to their school. They want to admit people that will make a difference for their school, that will only improve their school. So what are the tips for this? How do we go about this? So you want to focus on things that you have done and also the things that you want to do. So for example, if you participated in environmentally focused community service activities in high school, like you volunteered for all these different fairs to teach students and other people about climate issues, about how to save power, how to be more sustainable, how can you then take what you've learned from your service experience and then apply it to college experience? What can you do with that information? How can you be a leader, right? You developed this skill from volunteering. Perhaps you didn't create your own organization, but now that you were in that realm and you learned these things, maybe in the college you can open a club, perhaps if they don't have an environmental club or whatever it is that your niche is that you're interested in. So focus on the things that you have done, take the lessons out of that, and talk about here's what I want to do at your institution. The other thing is you want to demonstrate leadership. You don't just want to say, I'm a leader. You want to show them that you're a leader. It's kind of like when I teach my younger kids how to write essays and I say, show, don't tell. It's that same piece of advice. So show them that you're a leader through activities. So how were you a leader? Use one of your leadership roles in this essay. How were you a leader? And being a leader doesn't always mean, starting something brand new. You can have a leadership experience in a one-day service event that you did just because you stepped up. So you want to think both big and small in this essay. So what are the small things that you've already done that you can account for? And what are big extensions for how you want to see this change in the world? And then, as usual in any one of these essays, you want to be specific to you. So don't just say, I was in this club. What did you do? Right? And how can you use the lessons, the qualities, the skills that you learned, then this engagement at college? So really think about, what did I do? And I know a lot of students struggle with this, right? It's still honestly pretty hard for me. You kind of have to praise yourself, but you do so in a humble way, right? You don't just want to say, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best, but you do want to give yourself credit where credit is due. And you really want to think about, what have I accomplished? And if you're listening to this webinar and you're early on in your career, so I know that we have some ninth graders here, perhaps some 10th graders, or even juniors, it's not too late for you to realize that these are the kinds of things that you will have to highlight in your college application. So you can start thinking about those things now early. What kind of leadership position can I push myself to apply to, right? Maybe freshman year, you're just kind of getting used to being in high school, but sophomore year is a great time that you can start putting yourself kind of out there, and developing these leadership qualities, not just for the purpose of the college application, for the purpose of being, a holistic, well-rounded human being, but it never hurts to like think about how all of this will come together in an application as well. So questions that you can research: what official positions have you held within your school? So perhaps you were on student government, perhaps you were president or vice president of a club. It's also a great time to join a club, and then you can work your way up as the years go on. What official positions have you held within your community? So this could be anything. This could be a religious thing. It could be an extracurricular thing. It's perfectly fine to write about a religious position that you've held as well. You don't have to, some students really shy away from that, but I wouldn't, because you're not going to focus on your religion and your beliefs. You're instead going to focus on, what does it mean to be a leader, right? That's the important part in here. What leadership activities have you engaged in with your school? So for example, if you were on a student faculty committee, if you helped develop an extracurricular course, or if you helped give feedback about a class or a certain exam or tutoring way that your school was doing something, or a pathway that you gave feedback on to, and now they changed that because of you, or because you were on the committee that did that. And then importantly, you take all your leadership examples and experiences, and you talk about how those prepared you to participate in the college environment. And what does that environment look like to you, and what will your role be? Other things that you can think about as you're reflecting is, what challenges have you faced when you were put in a position of leadership? How did you overcome those challenges? What are your big accomplishments that are related to a position of leadership? And then finally, think about what changes you want to see in your community, and how you can bring about those changes with your leadership qualities, right? The colleges look towards you guys as the future generation, so you kind of want to lean into that role and accept that role, not shy away from it. Okay, so we covered the 3 most common prompts. There are more, of course. A lot of them start intersecting. So there's a diversity essay, which is pretty close to the community essay. There are extracurricular essays that ask you to elaborate on some of your extracurriculars as well. What makes a good activity? You want to think about something that you really dedicated a lot of time on. Long participation is good. Depth of participation is good. Something that you've achieved something in. What other types of things are important? Sometimes they ask you about your background. A lot of times there's like a fun essay. So I really like that because it shows kind of your personality. So it's kind of like, talk about a hobby you love. If you could teach a class, what would it be? What do you like to do for fun? Those kinds of essays. So those are a little bit less common. These 3 are really the most common that you should start thinking about. And if it's too early for you to be thinking about applying to college, start thinking about the types of activities that your kid can join, that would obviously benefit them holistically, but also be good in terms of a college application. So thank you guys so much for listening. As always, these webinars will be available online. I can scroll through the notes if anybody needs them. And I'm more than happy to stay behind and answer any questions if anybody has them. Thank you so much for joining and listening. I hope that this was helpful. And I will see you guys all next week. Next week, our topic is the CUNY and SUNY application, I believe. And I really love talking about that application because I am a CUNY alum. We will be here tomorrow on Thursday at the same time, and I'll go through those applications with you guys. So feel free to log off if you don't have any questions. If you do, please stay on. You can unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I'll stay on for the next few minutes and answer any questions. Thank you guys so much as always. Thank you. Good night.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Where can I find the webinar and which other webmail or address, please?
Oh, sure. I think most of them are posted on YouTube. You can reach out to Frances Kweller, who hosts all of these. I can put her email in the chat. I think she posts them on YouTube. Let me give you her email that you can reach out to her to ask for them specifically. I just wrote it in the chat. But they should be on the Kweller Prep YouTube channel. So you could check there first.
Excuse me. Can you show me? Sorry about that. Can you show me the third pages? Then I can copy and paste.
Of course, this one is good. You got it?
The third one. Let me see.
This
yeah.
one?
Let me
The
see.
second one?
No, the third one. The rest, the next one. Yeah, this one. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure, of course.
Have a good night.
Good night. All right, guys, thank you so very much. If there's no other questions, I hope that you guys will all be back for next week's webinar. And I'll see you then where we'll talk about SUNY and CUNY applications. Good night. Thanks for listening.